Sentire Media.
Well, hello there, and welcome back to another episode of A New Life in Italy. I'm your host, Samantha Wilson, and today's episode is all about the reality check that happens after the retire to Italy dream begins. Because somewhere between imagining your morning cappuccino in a quiet Italian piazza and actually trying to make the move happen, most people hit the same wall, and that is the Elective Residency Visa. And suddenly the dream that felt so simple becomes a maze of consulate rules and income questions and healthcare and tax confusion and rental contracts and, yes, of course, all of those Facebook groups filled with panic. In fact, today's episode comes from something that happened last week with one of our clients who became completely convinced that their Italian consulate had suddenly stopped accepting elective residency visa applications. And no matter what we said, no matter what evidence we showed, no matter how many times we explained that it was not true, they had already emotionally committed to the misinformation and were completely derailed. Now, misinformation online can be catastrophic to your application and your future plans, and it needs to be talked about. One person says you need $31,000 plus 30% for your spouse. Another says you need $80,000. Someone else says your investments count. Someone else says you can work. Then another person says they absolutely cannot work or your investments won't work. And before long, your excitement about retiring in Italy starts to feel overwhelming. You become discouraged or confused and afraid to make the wrong move. So today we're going to talk about what I would personally do right now if I was you and planning to retire in Italy. Not the fantasy version, not the Instagram one, and definitely not the Facebook ones. I want to walk you through the actual strategy that I would use if I were you starting from scratch today. And more importantly, I want to give you the practical things that you can actually do after listening to this episode. So the exact financial conversations that I would have with myself, the mistakes that I would avoid, the timelines that I would use, the tests I would do before moving, the documents that I would prepare first, and the mindset shifts that make this process dramatically easier emotionally. Because the people who succeed long-term in Italy are usually not the people who move the fastest. They're the people who prepare the smartest. So whether you're dreaming about moving to Italy after your last vacation, already pricing rentals online every night, or quietly wondering whether this dream is financially possible anymore, you're in the right place. Are you ready? Let's get started. I'm Samantha Wilson, and this is A New Life in Italy, a show for people who love Italy and are quietly trying to figure out what it would really take to build a life here. We talk honestly about the practical choices, the emotional shifts, and the parts of this journey that don't always get talked about, so that you can move forward feeling informed, grounded, and more confident. If you're somewhere between dreaming and doing, you are in exactly the right place. Now, let's get into today's show. Well, welcome back. Now, I think one of the biggest misunderstandings that people have about retiring in Italy is the idea that moving here is primarily a lifestyle decision. You know, slower mornings, healthier lifestyle, less stress, more life. It's not. Well, at least not at the beginning. At first, it's an administrative project because emotionally people are changing pace, yes, but what they run into first is bureaucracy. So that freedom is actually tied to bureaucracy. You have documents and translations and financial reviews and rental contracts, tax questions, and suddenly the dream feels very unromantic. I think this is where most people begin to spiral emotionally as well, because they start asking themselves, well, what if I don't qualify? What if I make a mistake? What if I sell my home too early? And what if Italy says no? And this is exactly why, if I were starting today, the first thing I would do is stop treating Italy like an escape plan. I would treat it like a structured transition. That mindset alone will change everything for you. And I would get brutally honest about my finances, not just to qualify for the visa, but to actually live in Italy. And this is probably the biggest pain point that people feel right now with the elective residency visa, and that's the income part. Not savings, not net worth, not I own my home outright, not I have investments, but the income to qualify for this visa. And more specifically, the passive reoccurring income. And this is where people get blindsided. Because online, everyone talks about the minimums, but consulates are not robots. They're not just checking boxes. They are evaluating stability. And increasingly, they're evaluating risk, especially after the explosion of interest in Italy over these last few years. So if I were planning my move to retire in Italy, I wouldn't aim for the minimum for the elective residency visa. I would aim for comfort as well. Not just the quality for the visa and increasing my income, but to survive emotionally after. And here's exactly what I would do. I would create a very simple spreadsheet with 3 columns. Column 1, guaranteed passive income. You're going to list your pensions, your rental income, your annuities, these things that come to you regular, reliable, guaranteed for life. These are the things that are going to get you the elective residency visa. And then in column 2, I want your variables or unstable income, like self-directed distributions, anything that's dependent on the market, say. And then column number 3 are your emergency reserves. How much cash or liquidity do you actually have? What do you have access to if something goes wrong? Because what consulates really want to see is stability, not creativity. Another thing I would personally do, I would test my retirement budget at today's exchange rate plus 10%, because currency fluctuations really matter a lot. And if your retirement only works financially when the euro is weak, you may not actually be financially ready yet. And if I needed another year to increase my passive income and maybe reduce debt or create a stronger financial cushion, I would wait the year. And I know you probably don't want to hear that, but rushing to Italy under financial pressure is one of the biggest mistakes that I see. Now, what else would I do? I would prepare my documents much earlier than I thought I needed to. And this is another place where a lot of people lose a lot of time unnecessarily, not because the visa is impossible, but because paperwork takes a lot longer than people expect, especially apostilles or especially FBI background checks and criminal record checks if, for example, you're applying in San Francisco. And if some of my documents contain errors like names on my financial statements don't match all the names on my passport exactly, well, those things need to be fixed, and that takes time. So if I were preparing for a 2026 move or even early 2027, I would begin organizing my documents at least 6 to 8 months before I intend to apply. And I would create both digital folders and physical folders. You will need both. And I would organize it all by my vital records, meaning my marriage certificates, any divorce records if it's applicable, or your tax returns and bank statements, all of the things that support your application, both electronically and physically, everything. And here's a practical tip that almost nobody talks about. I would also spend time writing my cover letter, thinking about what I'm putting in my cover letter from the point of view as a financial summary for the consulate, meeting all of the requirements they want to see. Keep it simple, keep it clear, make it easy to read, not too much feelings about how much you love Italy and how you've traveled here 1,000 times and all of the things you've done when you're here. Just simple, clear, easy read. Monthly passive income totals, savings overview, income sources, healthcare coverage, where you're going to live, the most important things they want to see. Remember, the person reviewing your file is human and maybe doesn't really, isn't too entertained by their job. So the easier you make your situation to understand and the faster, the better. All right. What else would I do? I would stop listening to random Facebook advice. Now, this is a really big one because the amount of misinformation online surrounding the ERV right now is honestly staggering. And the problem is not just incorrect information. The problem is emotional contagion. Panic spreads very quickly online. One person posts about a denial without truly explaining the actual financial weaknesses in their application. And suddenly hundreds of people become convinced the visa is impossible. Or someone posts, my consulate said no, and instantly people interpret that as no one is getting approved anymore. And then someone says, oh, they stopped accepting appointments, or I can't get an appointment. And suddenly people believe that Italy is shutting down the entire visa category. And honestly, this is dangerous, not just financially, but emotionally for you. Because once panic enters the process, people stop thinking strategically. They begin making emotional decisions, like selling your home too fast or moving money around impulsively, maybe canceling plans or rushing your application, or at worst, abandoning your dreams entirely based on incomplete or false information. One of the smartest things that you can do during this process is to protect your mental environment. Not every opinion deserves equal weight. Not every Facebook comment deserves your nervous system. If I were planning my move right now, I would dramatically reduce the noise. I would focus on official information, qualified professionals, and people who are actively working with applications every single day. And here's a practical rule that I would personally use. Before believing anything online, I would ask myself 3 questions. Number 1, was this information official? Does the information even sound realistic? And finally, does it even matter to me what someone else did or what happened to someone else? Because your age, nationality, income structure, tax exposure, healthcare needs, and consulate are all unique to you alone. This isn't a copy and paste process. Crowdsourcing your future from strangers online is a recipe for disaster, so you have to resist. Now, finally, I would spend more time choosing where rather than how. Now, this is another big mistake that a lot of people make. They obsess over the visa, but they barely think about the actual lifestyle. The visa is only the entry ticket. It's the key to get in. The real question is, can you actually build a life here? And I think many people romanticize small towns in Italy without fully understanding the realities of it. Yes, the villages are beautiful, and the pace is slower and friendly, and life can feel very magical. But there can also be very limited healthcare access, few English speakers, aging populations, very little public transportation or unreliable transportation. There could be bureaucratic isolation and, of course, loneliness, especially in retirement. And this becomes even more important when people start researching the 7% flat tax towns, because suddenly everybody wants this tax benefit. But they're not asking themselves, do I actually want to live in that small town in the south of Italy? And that matters a lot. Saving money on taxes means very little if you are isolated, unhappy, or struggling every day. So here's something I would personally do. I would do what I call a February test, not a summer vacation, a February test. I would spend at least 2 to 3 weeks in my chosen location during off-season. I would ask myself, can I still imagine living here when it rains for 10 days or 15 days out of the month? When all the tourists are gone, or when half of the restaurants and the shops are closed? When I need blood work, when I need groceries, internet, how good is the internet? What about the transportation? Because retirement in Italy is lived mostly in ordinary Tuesdays, not vacation Saturdays. And I would also rent first. And I know this one hurts some people emotionally because you're all dreaming about buying that beautiful villa or that stone farmhouse. But personally, I would rent first almost every time, because your first year in Italy will teach you things that no amount of research can. You will learn how you actually live here, what climates you prefer, whether you need a car, how much isolation feels comfortable, and what services matter the most to you, and whatever your dream town still feels like during February. And financially, this will protect you, because buying in Italy is not like buying property in North America, for example. It's a long game here. You don't flip and move on. Houses take a lot longer to sell. And if you're unhappy, this wait could feel like a chain instead of a lifeline. So personally, I would give myself permission not to rush that part. Now, here's 5 things that I would absolutely not do. I'll start with what I'm not going to do. Number 1, I would not buy property before fully understanding my residency timing, my visa strategy, and knowing exactly where I want to live. Number 2, I would not rely on Facebook groups or any social media for advice. And most importantly, not for tax advice, my friends. Please, please do not do this. Number 3, I would not assume my consulate behaves exactly like other consulates because they don't. Number 4, I would not move without an emergency buffer for exchange rate fluctuations and unexpected expenses. And number 5, I would not wait until the last minute to get all of my documents together because delays happen all the time. And if you waited forever to get an appointment and you're not ready, this is very frustrating. And I would also build a community before arrival. This is what I would focus a lot on. And this is probably the most overlooked part of retiring abroad. And that's the loneliness. Nobody talks about it enough, especially for retirees leaving behind adult children and routines and lifelong friendships and careers and their identity. Italy can absolutely give you beauty, but beauty alone does not create belonging. And if I were planning to move to Italy, I would begin building connections way before arriving. You can do that by joining language classes or local groups, Facebook groups even, for connection, not information. Meetups and maybe hobbies, professional communities, anything. And here's the one practical thing that I would personally do. I would start taking Italian lessons before arriving. Not because you need to become fluent before you move, but because even basic Italian will change your confidence dramatically. It changes how connected you feel, how independent you feel, and honestly, how welcomed you feel. Because the people who thrive long-term in Italy are usually the people who build roots, not just routines, and roots take time to grow. I think what I would ultimately remind myself if I were planning retirement in Italy right now is this. You do not need to rush the dream to make it real. In fact, the slower, more thoughtful approach is often the one that will create the best outcome. Italy isn't going anywhere, and honestly, the people who enjoy this life the most are usually the ones who approached it with preparation instead of desperation. So if this is your dream, fantastic, wonderful, protect it. Plan carefully, give yourself a margin, research deeply, visit differently. Test your assumptions and stop comparing your journey to everyone else's online. Because your move to Italy should not just look beautiful from the outside, it should actually feel sustainable once you're living it. And that is a very different thing. It's time for listener questions. Just like the old radio call-in shows, my team has picked 3 listener questions. I have no idea what these questions are, but I haven't been stumped yet. Are you ready? Let's get started. All right, my friends, question time. Question number 1. How much passive income do I realistically need to qualify for the Elective Residency Visa in 2026? All right, passive income you absolutely need, bare minimum, 31,200, rounded up to 32,000 euros net euros per year of regular, reliable, guaranteed income for life. You need to have 32,000 net euros per person per year. And it needs to be well documented. If you are applying with your spouse and one person has all of the income and the other one has just a little, you can share income, that's fine. But together you must have a minimum of 64,000 net euros, and I mean net of any mortgage payments, net of any major debt, 64,000 net euros per year for 2 people, or 32,000 per person. But please understand that that is the bare minimum. You should try to strive for more. And you should have other assets, other investments, other money, that safety net, those extra things that will help them understand that you're stable. Question number 2, what can I do if my consulate doesn't have any appointments available? Oh, this is everywhere. First of all, I'll tell you it's not unusual and don't panic too much. It doesn't mean they're not accepting appointments or they're not accepting the visa. It just means that they're full. And the only thing that you can do is just keep trying. And sometimes if you try very late at night and an appointment might open, some consulates are opening appointments very close to the time that they're available. So for example, all of a sudden today you'll see something for tomorrow, not 3 weeks or 3 months down the road. So when you're ready, you're ready. Make sure you have everything in order because if an appointment pops up, you'll want to grab it. But it is taking much longer now than it used to. So you just have to be patient and persistent and keep trying. Question number 3, what happens if my elective residency visa is denied after I already rented or bought a property in Italy? Well, this is always the trick, isn't it? Because to get the ERV, you need to have a place to live in Italy. So you do have to take a chance. And if you have rented something and paid the deposits and the commissions, it's quite a good chunk of money you've put out. What you can do is, if you want to give up the rental, and there's no way to fix your visa, first of all, look and see if you can fix your visa, fix the deficiencies. If it's unfixable, like you need more money and you don't have more money, then you have to ask yourself, do you still want to keep that rental in Italy as your own vacation home, as a long-term rental? Keeping in mind you can stay here 90 days out of 180 days, and sometimes having a rental as your second home, you can unpack and have that's the place that you keep going to every time you come to Italy. You're just only staying for 90 days at a time. Perhaps your friends can stay there when you're not there, but it becomes your home. So you have to ask yourself, do you still want this property? Can you still keep this property? And if you do, then just do nothing. If you don't, then give your notice and break the lease, and you should be able to get some of your damage deposit back. You might lose a little bit because, of course, the owner is now changing his situation. He did have a secured lease for 4 years at least, 1 to 4, and then you have to compensate for that. But that's all you can do. If you bought a house, well, then you have to think to yourself, I'm going to enjoy it. And hopefully when you bought it, you realize the visa's not 100%. It never is. So you can either just continue to enjoy it or rent it out or try to sell it. I mean, those are the options that you have. Before we wrap up, I want to remind you of something. You don't need all of the answers right now. You just need the right questions and the space to think clearly. If this episode helped you feel more grounded or less alone, that's exactly why the show exists. You can find all of the links and the resources that I mentioned in today's episode in the show notes. And if you want to go deeper, head over to smartmoveitaly.com for more ways that we can help you make your move to Italy a whole lot easier. And if you're enjoying the show, subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing it with someone that is also dreaming about Italy helps more than you know. Thanks again for spending time with me. I will see you next week. Ciao for now.
Sentire Media.
Hey, podcast producers and show hosts. Do you want to join a podcast network that celebrates all things Italian? At Sentire Media, we understand the allure of Italy and its unique culture. Our devoted team of hosts and producers are all driven by their shared passion for Italy. And we work tirelessly to create the best lifestyle podcasts and content that will whisk you away to the very heart of Italy. With us, you can savor the mouth-watering flavors, get lost in the stories from the past, break down the cultural barriers, and truly immerse yourself in the vibrant traditions of this intoxicating country. If you have a great podcast idea or are already in production and would like to join Sentire Media, head over to sentiremedia.com, that's SENTIRE media.com, and find out how to submit your show.